I think for anyone who does this type of job and they're married in a relationship, family, all of our loved ones kind of make a sacrifice for us to do it. I do think we are always following the men's game. You think about the progress of how important our back row C or D, so our back row attack in one is becoming. It's been a key piece of men's offense for a while. So now, that you're seeing in the women's game, that's coming a big piece of our offense in the women's game as well. Any coach who says they know everything and acts like they know everything, to me, is not a good coach. I think that as a player, you have that luxury, but as a coach, you don't. I love the Polish league. I actually like Polish volleyball. I like I'm a fan of the Polish national team. And I am a fan of Stefano Lavarini as well.
Hello, Coach. Big thanks for joining my podcast. It's a great pleasure that you find the time to speak with me. And I'm very, very happy that you accepted my request.
Thank you. It's great. I love talking to everyone in Poland. So I'm great. It's happy.
At the beginning, I have to start with a simple question because recently, you changed your position in the volleyball, Canadian volleyball. You became a high performance director. What does it mean? And what are your responsibilities? And yes, could you tell me more about this position?
Sure. A high performance director. Essentially, I look after the national team. So when I was the head coach of Canada, I answered to a high performance director. His name was Julien Boucher. And he looked after both the men's and the women's programs. So what I took on was his role with the women's program. I look after the women's senior national team, our senior B team, and then anything from U17 to U21. So the whole women's national team development program, as well as the senior national team. So just providing vision, direction, putting the pieces of the puzzle together so that the head coach of the national team can focus on, just winning games on court. And
have you been involved in the recruiting Giovanni Guidetti as a head coach, or it was behind your back?
No, it wasn't behind my back. So when I decided to take this role, I very much wanted to lead the selection of the new head coach. And so I was the one who reached out to Giovanni, and I was the one who had the conversations with him to put him in place with the senior national team. Of course, there's other people involved in the final selection of a head coach, but no, it was me who called him up and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about coaching Canada?"
What motivates you to choose Giovanni?
I mean, I think Giovanni's just his experience working with so many different national teams at the highest level. He's a highly successful coach. He's been to multiple Olympics. And I think the big thing, like the work he did with Turkey, the progress he made with Turkey and helping them take that next step to be a world power in volleyball. I've also been in Gio's gym. I do like the way he works with the athletes, how he works with staff. I thought that I think that his values and what's important to him really align with us in Canada. So I also really wanted someone who was excited about Canada, who is excited about our continued potential, and really want to see us through to LA 2028 and Gio's all those things. So,
And are you not worried that you will start to miss coaching?
I'm very worried I'm going to miss coaching. It's early days. I think that I'm in this position. This isn't a position I wanted to get into. It'll allow me to, broaden my career, but I am worried I'm going to miss coaching. I don't think coaching is off the table completely. I think just for now, in the immediate sense, I'm focusing on learning this role and doing a really good job of this role, setting up the team and the program for continued success. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't, considering going back to coaching, or at least having that be part of my role moving forward. That I don't know yet.
When I was doing research to interview, I found one quote, one story from your family, because when you move from Australia to Canada, your kids ask you, why are we moving to Canada? And you said, because we are chasing the Olympics. And you were chasing this Olympics so hard until almost the second to last game of the VNL. And I'm wondering how tough was for you to manage, the fact that it was so close to be at so close to achieve your dream, but at the same time, it was so far because of, I don't want to say one game because it was, months and years of preparation, but, it was so close that even at the second to last game, you were still have a chance to be at the Olympics.
Yeah. When I took this job, I really took it because I thought we could go to the Olympics, and I still think that's possible. To be so close is so hard. It's almost more painful because you're so close. And I still think that all of us, the players as well as the staff, are still processing that. I mean, to be so close and miss out on something you worked really, really hard for. But you also have to remind yourself how far you came. When we took over the program in 2021, and I started working with the program in 2019, but as head coach in 2021, we were number 18 in the world. And we sat, with this playing group, and we said, hey, we want to go to Paris, and this is how we're going to do it. And, a lot of people just thought, we're a little bit crazy. We're a little bit nuts. We're so far away. How is this possible? You essentially need to be a top 10 in the world team if you don't qualify out of the Olympic qualifying tournament. But we absolutely fostered this sense of belief within the program that this was possible. So slowly we progressed, and every year, number 18 in the world, number 15, number 11, number 10, and now we're number 8 in the world. You have to remember that there's a lot to be proud of, and you haven't reached your ultimate goal yet, but there's so much to be proud of. And so I do think there's moments when it's extremely painful that it came down to one game. And I think in sport, you almost sign up for that. That someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And it was a real fairy tale story, but we didn't get the fairy tale ending. And that's really, really hard. I think it's hard on everyone, but you can't forget the fact that we came a really, really long way. And I think there's a whole generation of young players in Canada who only know Canada as a team who can beat some top nations, who can play with the top nations, who's a top 10 team. And that's really cool. So the legacy around that, you have to be proud of that. And in the moments when it is really hard and you think in a way you failed, you have to remind yourself that you came a really long way. So very hard, but lots to be proud of.
And how much the Canadian women volleyball changed since your first days in this team?
A lot. I think, what people don't see is the larger development pathway that we've built within Canada. How we now identify athletes earlier, we monitor them and we evaluate them longer. We're not just hoping they turn back up and play in the national team, but we're very much a part of their development and progress. I'm really excited for this next quad because we're going to see athletes come into the team come into the program who we started working with at 16 years old. So I'm really proud of what we've built. I also think with women's volleyball and with our Canadian national team, we've kind of dared them to have these big dreams, and we foster this sense of belief. We definitely don't do some things well, but we're not going to lose sleep over that. Let's really look at what we do well and play in a way that puts that on show. And I think that our style of playing was sometimes messy, but that fight and that belief and that compete was there. And I'm pretty proud of what we've done over the last 4 years.
And do you see the progress when it comes to the popularity of volleyball in Canada? I'm not mean only women's volleyball, but also men's volleyball. I remember what Thomas Samuel did with men's team, how good the Canadian team was at the qualifiers in 2023. But at the same time, I'm also working in the basketball environment. And I know how also the Canadian basketball grow because of the Canadian basketball team results, become the NBA stars from Canada. So I'm wondering, do you see the progress, and do you see even to chance, the areas that the Canadian volleyball can even grow and become bigger, more popular in the country that is focused around hockey? Volleyball has actually always been a pretty popular sport in Canada.
I think the level's not quite what you would see in European nations, and we don't have the population of the US. So our country is, second biggest country in the world, but our population is not far off that of Poland. Okay. So when we're talking about the number of people, we're really, really spread out. So the number of the level of talent or the amount of talent we have to choose from is small. It's not like that of the US. I would say the popularity of the sport has shifted a little bit. It's always been popular, but now people are just excited about women's volleyball. It's a great time to be involved in women's sport, but particularly in Canada, like I said, we have this, we have 15, 16-year-old girls who have only ever seen Canada on the world stage. And I know when I was growing up, I didn't have that luxury. We knew we had a national team, but they weren't very visible. Didn't necessarily know who they were. They were working hard, obviously, in their own gym, but they weren't as public as our athletes are now. And when you win games, people get more excited about the program. I mean, winning breeds excitement, and that's just across any sport. We also now have a greater platform than before, playing on the world stage in places like Volleyball Nations League, World Championships, and being so close to qualifying for the Olympics. Like, there was a lot of following around us within Canada. So just the visibility of the team, the visibility of the program, it makes a big difference for funding opportunities, as well as for just young girls and young athletes knowing that this can be a path for them. When we took over our development program in 2019, we said to this young group of athletes, we no longer want people who want to play for Canada. We want people who want to aspire to be Olympians. And that's different. You can have a good pro career and you can play for your national team and compete with the national team, but that's not necessarily the same thing as playing for your national team and wanting to be an Olympian and making the decisions and investing the time and energy into that path. I think that's a really important distinction that we started to make in 2019 with the young athletes who are now going to, starting to come through our path. And then we still continue to have some, there's still some upgrades we need to make technically. And I do think we need more time for that. We're not going to make a huge change in 4 years. I think that takes time to build the systems and the pathway and the coaching to be able to address some of those technical challenges that we have. I find Europe, you guys have the luxury of playing at a high level from an early age. We don't here. We have our university system, and volleyball looks a little bit different. So how do you work within this context to compete against those volleyball nations? And I think that's a really important thing you need to be aware of and work within.
And how could you describe the training, junior training system of Canada? Can we compare this to the American way of training? What are the key things the coaches focused when they coaching kids and teenagers in Canada?
Where you mean the key technical things that they focus on?
Yeah, like the biggest aspect they take care of, what the key areas of training, because sometimes in different countries they prefer to more the physicality trainings. In Japan or right. They prefer a more technical way of training. So what are the Canadian DNA of coaching?
Well, I mean, I can only really speak for in our gym. I think Canada, there's lots of coaches across the country, and there's a very varied approach. I think in our gym, we are big and we are physical. We're not a great passing team yet. And so we want to be on the end line serving as much as possible, and we want to be great at the net. So for us, we really are trying to develop effective serving, aggressive serving. We want to use our size at the net and have as many blockers on the ball as possible. So the style of volleyball that we're playing, this is what we're teaching. Because passing is something that we're trying to improve at. Everything we do, we want to be as game-like as possible. So when we're teaching skills or doing some technical development, we want to bring as many components into the game as possible. But I would say our style of volleyball is we want to be great on the end line, consistent on the end line. We want to be aggressive at the net as blockers, and we want to be excellent high ball attacking and setting teams. We work a lot in the Canadian team. When I was with the team, we worked a lot in high ball situations. We worked a lot off medium pass situations. We acknowledged that, our passing, we were passing at 45% in system. So we have to be really, really good at out of system and medium balls. And that, I would say for the last quad, we called it our style of play. We're not going to lose sleep we're not going to be the team who's in system 65% of the time, running a really complex offense. We have to keep it simple and be great in medium pass and high ball situations. And that's really how we train across the country. I'd say we've tried to push, almost shift how we think about women's volleyball to play a big aggressive style. I think the women's game is chasing the men's game. So how do we encourage coaches to let women be creative and play aggressive, introduce more of a multi-zone attack, which we sometimes don't see a lot at university. And I think sometimes that does hurt, the women who are going on to play professionally, internationally. So how do we incorporate this multi-zone attack, much like the men's game? How do we ensure that we are able to block more zones in more of a read blocking situation rather than a spread block situation? So some of these concepts we've tried to instill throughout Canada, and it's very much a work in progress. I think some coaches do a great job of understanding, what's required and what we're looking for, and others, they know what they know. And I think that that's our job to still make sure that they understand that the women's game can be so much more aggressive and it can be a lot faster than what we're playing. So, what are we doing at the younger ages to complement that?
You told to me a very interesting thing about the fact that you are chasing the men volleyball, because when I look at the today, like the top stars, top opposites like Vargas, like Karakurt, like Stysiak, Herbots, sometimes when I see the way they serve, they spike, I thinking came to the conclusion that the women volleyball becoming more masculine or men volleyball. Yes.
I think that I do think we are always following the men's game. You think about the progress of how important our back row C or D, so our back row attack in one, is becoming. It's been a key piece of men's offense for a while. So now, that you're seeing in the women's game, that's coming a big piece of our offense in the women's game as well. Serving as well. You're seeing a lot more spin serving happening in the women's game than you did, 10 years ago. I also think like the way we play high balls, I think 10 years ago, women were playing them high, really far off the net, a lot of really safe. Now you're seeing women play high inside and on the net because they want to fight at the net. They want to play on the tape. And I think the men's game's been doing that for a while. I think there's a lot more creativity in the men's game. I think there's some gender pieces there. I think a lot of times when we coach women, we want them to play very structured volleyball. They want women to play within this box, and there's less time for creativity and practice and games. And we almost don't allow it enough in women's sport in general. And where the men, it's always allowed. And when you go into warm up, you go into a men's gym, quite often you see them playing around with them, playing 2-on-2, playing short court. You don't see that as often in a women's gym. They'll wait for a structured warm up because that's the way they've been coached. So I think that you have to be really aware of creating time and space for women to be creative and learn to be aggressive. And so I think there's lots of reasons why the women's game is chasing the men's game, but it's exciting. I love fast volleyball. I like aggressive volleyball. I believe that you'll make big mistakes, and that's fine. Let's keep it simple but be aggressive and be fast.
And speaking about your career, what shaped your coaching philosophy the most, or who?
Wow, that's such a big question. I think early on in my career, how I was coached as a player or what I valued as a player shaped how I started my coaching career. And I look back and go, maybe that wasn't the right way. Like when I first started coaching, I coached everyone the way I wanted to be coached. And not everyone had my experiences or shared my values. And so you didn't necessarily connect with all the other athletes. I think I worked with some really strong mentors in Australia. I worked with the former men's national team coach, Russ Borjo. I worked with Dan Eilert, who was recently in Germany, who's back now with Australia. And then when I came to Canada, I spent a lot of time with Glenn Hogue. I also have another coaching mentor named Alison McNeil, who's actually from basketball. And I think all my mentors throughout my time have really shaped how I think about coaching, what's important to me, but what my values and my philosophy was at 10 years ago as a new coach. I didn't know any better. So I coached the way I wanted to be coached. And then now I think I have a little bit more self-awareness, a little bit more of an idea of what's important to me, of who I am as a coach, of who I want to be as a coach. And I think it will continue to evolve.
And what were your biggest misconceptions about the coaching job when you started working?
Oh, biggest misconception. I think as a player, everything is black and white. It's like, why didn't they do that? Like, or, like everything is black and white and everything is just so simple. And now as a coach, I realize everything's gray. There's a good decision, a bad decision, and an okay decision. But the amount of times you're going to get it wrong. Like, I think when I first started coaching, I thought you would just get everything right. Like, you might fail once in a while, you might get it wrong once in a while, but then I realized, like, with coaching, you actually get it wrong quite a bit. And it's what you do with getting it wrong that matters. But I definitely also thought as a player that coaches, they were on court practice and then they were at games and that's it. Like, I didn't realize how much work was behind the scenes with preparing for practice, preparing for games, managing staff, managing athletes, managing all these different people. I say as a coach, I'm in the business of people. Like, I'm a people manager. Like, and I think that when I was a new coach, I didn't realize how much of that was part of the role.
I remember a few months ago, I hosted MW Wieniarski in my podcast, the former Polish national team player. He's now a German national team coach. And he told me, as a player, I thought that I know everything about the volleyball, that after, so many seasons playing at the top level, after winning almost all possible championships and medals, I thought that I know everything, and every year it grows the feeling that I know everything. But when I became a coach, all like fall down, and because like the the hardest thing to adapt was like when you are a player, you are managing one player yourself.
Yeah.
But when you are the coach, you managing like 14 version of yourself. And when the player after the training in the club, he came for the few hours to training and goes home, you as a coach going home and bringing the job to home, because you have to analyze, you have to think, managing the players. And he said that everything he thought about the volleyballs, or most thing, like went apart.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, and I think you have the luxury as a player to think you know everything and then be wrong. Like, it's a luxury. As coaches, you don't have that luxury. And when my very first year coaching national team in Australia, I felt like I needed to know everything. I need to have all the answers. And I coached that way. Like, I knew everything and I acted like it. And it didn't make me a very good coach at all. And I had to learn that, I actually don't know everything. There's a lot for me to learn, and I'm okay not knowing, and I'm okay trying to figure it out. And even now, I mean, I think some people interpret it as, just because I say I don't know something, that's not me saying I'm not a good coach, or me saying that I can't do this job. It's me saying I've got to figure that part out yet. Like, any coach who says they know everything and acts like they know everything, to me, is not a good coach. I think that as a player, you have that luxury, but as a coach, you don't. And I also remember as a player, I never had sleepless nights. I could go play the game and go the next day and we're good. As a coach, like, that's all I have. I don't think I sleep between April and October, because you're either up working or you're up worrying about the work or the plan. And even the most well thought out plans, like, you're worried, like, is it the right plan? Is it the right information? So I don't think I lost sleep as a player. I definitely lose sleep as a coach.
I remember last season I had a chance to speak about you with Andrea Mitrowicz, because she played in Łódź, and I asked her about your biggest skill, about to characterize you, to describe you. She said, and also Mateusz Nykiel. I don't know if you remember him from the Australia days. Statty Matty.
Yes. Mateusz. I loved working. Yes, I do.
They both said similar thing about you, that your biggest skill is listening to people.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm impressed. Thank you. I would take that as a compliment. I think I've always thought as players that they have a lot of information, and I see it more as like a collaboration. I'm not there to I don't know everything, and I think that they have a lot of information to bring to the table. It's interesting because I don't think all athletes respond well to that. I think some athletes see that as a negative, but for me, I think it's important for me to take the information, the experience of an athlete and staff members, and use that, decide what's useful, decide what's not, how we can use that information to benefit us. So I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, but it's interesting for me that I know that you talk about this topic, about the gender topic in the coaching many times, but I was wondering if the fact that you are the woman working with the woman are like your bonus comparing to the men coach, because there are some things, for example, just for example, the period things, it's hard for men coach understanding this thing. And you as I remember this also interesting story. When I spoke with Roberta Racke, she played in LKS, and LKS was coached by Alessandro Capini. And she said that the one thing that she praising the Alessandro is the fact that, we sometimes, the woman, one day we have we see flowers everywhere, we are over the moon, and then second day we want to kill everybody. And Alessandro is great because he can manage the both ways of us.
I think there are some positives. Like, obviously there's some things that athletes will be more comfortable talking to me about, and some things I'll totally understand. So I do think there are some bonuses for sure, but I also think there's some unique challenges. You have to think, if I'm one of the only women in the world who coach, internationally, there's not very many of us, and most of our players are coached by men. I do think that there's this challenge of how I am perceived, or if I'm doing something different, is it seen as different good or different bad? And I do think there are some unique challenges to women coaching women, but there are definitely some positives for women coaching women. And I'd like to think I'm a little bit more relatable, but I also think at some stage, hopefully coaches are just coaches. I mean, and whether you're a woman or a man, I don't think it makes as much of a difference as people think.
And how big challenge was for you to combine the coaching career with parenthood? Extremely hard. And it's funny because since I stepped down, everyone assumes it's because of my family. My family had nothing to do with the decision for me to step down. I have been coaching national teams since my youngest was 1 year old. And it's extremely, extremely hard. I think for anyone who does this type of job and they're married, in a relationship, family, all of our loved ones kind of make a sacrifice for us to do it. And I think just with kids, it's even harder because of the sacrifices they have to make. I think with family too, like my kids were so bought into what we were doing from a young age. They knew I coached Australia, and they're really proud of mom coaching Australia. But when we came to Canada, they knew why we were coming, and they were like, "Why are we leaving our friends?" They were 4, 5, and 7 years old, but they knew that we talked about the Olympics, and we talked every day about this is to go to the Olympics. So they were so bought in. They would, every year would be like, oh, it's this many Christmases until the Olympics, this many birthdays until the Olympics. And so they were a part of the journey. They felt like they were a part of the team. They were just as disappointed as the team when we didn't qualify. So I have this really great family unit that's very supportive. My husband's he's really supportive as well. And I don't think it would be possible if they weren't. But I miss birthdays. I miss family events. I don't go to Christmas concerts. I don't go to the summer concerts. When I go on traveling, my family's really upset. My kids are upset. It's very, very hard. It's very stressful on my husband, but they were all in. They were all in. And I remember in the final year, I would leave for Volleyball Nations League, and they can't keep track of all the competitions. They're still pretty young, but they would say, "Is this it? Like, is this the one? Is this the one that sends us to Paris?" And they were all in. Like, my whole wall in my office is like of them, I'm just looking at now, but they have all the cards and the signs of for Paris, and so very hard. You said in one interview that you always celebrate Mother Days abroad
with the team.
Yes,
with the team. Yeah, the team. I'm usually away, usually in a training camp for Volleyball Nations League. So I don't think I've ever really done Mother's Day with my kids. They just don't know any different. Like, I think that's the thing, is I don't see it as my kids missing out. It's very hard. I have 3 children, so the amount of support that my family needs to do my job and how we have to manage our family is very, very hard. But they don't know any different. And so I don't think they're worse off. We do Mother's Day early, or we do Mother's Day late. We celebrate birthdays when I'm home. I try and FaceTime as much as possible. I try and, they play sports. I try and see videos of their games when I'm away, but they don't really know any different. And I know they're pretty proud of me. So, yeah.
And how you handle, the fact that, okay, you have to coach, but at the beginning, after you give birth to a child, you have to feed them.
Yeah.
Because I know that I had a story, you said this in interview with Sarah Kalisz, Polish journalist, that 4 days after giving birth to one of the child, you were on the training course.
Yeah, it was my third, I think. I gave birth on a Monday and I coached on a Friday. And it was just what it was. Like, I feel like women are capable of amazing things. And I think I had a job to do. So I just brought my baby along, and it was a learning curve because, the club I was coaching for, I had to have like my own hotel room. I had to have a car seat on the team van or team bus. They had to book an infant when I traveled. And when I was at practice, I would breastfeed in the middle of practice. And at first, I think for some of like my staff, it was a little bit awkward, but then it just became normal. I mean, there was games where I would have to feed and run on court, go coach. And then like when there was a break in the set, I'd run back and feed some more and then go back on court. And I had a team physio who, I'd support around me who would help with the baby when I traveled, because my husband didn't travel. And I think of it, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Like, it was a little bit crazy, but at the same time, there's this whole group of women who I coached during that time who saw me do it. And they just think, then you think, wow, okay, if I want to coach, I can do that. And it just changes how people start to think about coaching. And I think for me growing up, coaching has always looked like a certain way. It's always been men that maybe have families, maybe not, didn't really see them. And it just looked a certain way. And now I'm just showing another option of coaching. My coaching looks different to other people's coaching. Sometimes you might see a kid around there. I think in Australia, there's been times when there's like a baby or a pram parked on the sidelines while I'm coaching. But my family life looks really different too. I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I probably work longer hours than my husband. I travel way more than my husband. So our roles at home also look different. And that was hard at first, because I think a lot of people judge you on your coaching and your home life. And then I just got to the stage where I just didn't care. I'm like, this is what I need to do. And this is what it looks like for me. And it looks different. It doesn't mean it's inferior. It just looks different. So yeah, I coached early when my kids were born.
And do you think today, for example, for the professional women athletes, it's easier to combine, the pro career and the pregnancy? Because I heard the stories from the past in Poland that there were some cases that when the athlete, for example, in handball, that when she got pregnant, she had her contract terminated. Because there was a clause in the contract that if you become pregnant, you have no money.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I don't think it's easy at all to have children and work, let alone have children and play a professional sport. But I think there has been some progress, and I think it's easier now than where it used to be. I think there's a lot more awareness around it. And I think there's a lot more support around it than there was. I recently saw that the USA Volleyball has allowed for children under the age of I forget, under the age of 7 to be on the bench for club coaches to be able to coach club, because they previously were never allowed. So if a club coach, I'm talking at the youth levels, was coaching, they weren't able to have their child on the bench. And I remember in Australia, I was coaching club and I had a newborn in a stroller, and I parked the stroller like right by the bench, and the referee told me I couldn't have the stroller there. And I said, what do you expect me to do? And they said, well, it's a danger. I said, well, it's my child. Like, I'm the one who's accepting the risk. And they made a big deal of it. And I'm like, well, I can't coach if you don't let me have this stroller here. But it was such a big deal. And it was really disappointing that it was such a big deal. But I remember having that fight. And I'm sure there's lots of women who've had that fight. And now in USA, they've just mandated the fact that that's allowed. And for me, that's huge. Like that's huge. And I think, there's lots of stories of those little things where it just hasn't been easy. I had nowhere to feed my kid or my babies when I was at practice or in tournaments or practicing. Like, why aren't we thinking about how do we include more women in coaching in this space by just providing more support? So I think players are no different. I have definitely heard stories of contracts being terminated when people fall pregnant or not being supported. And what is maternity leave? How are you earning money when you're a professional athlete who decides to have a baby? Like, what does that look like? I think it's still very challenging, but it's come a long way for sure.
And I was wondering, because you said about one of the biggest topics when people talking about you is about the fact that you are one of the rare example of the woman coaching at the top level. Now we see in Bulgaria have a woman, and we have also Lauren Bertolacci in Switzerland. But I spoke with many Polish veteran, like the women, women volleyball players who coming to the end of their careers, and I'm asking them often, what are your plans about career? Maybe you're thinking about coaching, and I almost receiving the same response. Michał, you see that the environment is very hard. There's only one coach at the top level. This one from Canada, always mentioning you. And I was thinking, yes, do you see from your perspective or from your experience or talking with the players, with people of volleyball, do you see progress when it comes to the women players starting to coach or wanting to coach at the senior level? Because it's one thing that many women coaches like to coach kids, but it's when it comes to the coaching seniors, to be honest, in Poland, in the first top two divisions, central division, there is only one female coach and one female assistant in the top division.
Yeah. I don't think it's come a long way. I think that we've seen the growth of women's sports and we've seen more money and more opportunities for female athletes. I don't think we've seen it for female coaches. You talk about Lauren Bertolacci, one of the only other women who coach internationally. She's one of my best friends. We grew up together through playing and coaching, and we think it's funny that some of the only two coaches are very connected. The world is that small. And there's that few women who coach internationally. I don't think it's getting better. When I first started in VNL in 2021, there was 3 of us. And then 22, 23, 24, I was the only one. That's not progress. And I actually think the progress is not by just putting people into roles where maybe they're not qualified or don't have the experience. I don't think that's how we do progress. I think, in my opinion, the reason why I got into coaching and the reason why I was able to progress in coaching is I had people reach out to me and go, hey, you'd be perfect for this. Hey, I think you could do this job. And they were all men. And I think what we need is for current coaches, male or female, but right now it's predominantly men, they need to help identify future potential in women. And they need to be the ones to also say, hey, I think you could do this. I'm going to support you. Here's some roles. Here's a role that I think you could do a really good job at. And I think that's what needs to happen. I think there needs to be more of a commitment from the current coaches to help progress female players into these roles. And the conversations we're having with I'm having with players as they retire is like, have you thought about coaching? How can I help you? Like, where do you want to go to if coaching is important? And I think that's got to come from the current era of coaches. I think we have to be committed to seeing, greater diversity in our benching staff. It doesn't mean by putting people there who aren't ready, but supporting them on their journey to become ready. And I wouldn't be here coaching Canada had I not had, some key people in my life say, you should apply for Australia. Actually, you know what? You should apply for Canada. And I think that was crucial.
But it's interesting thing because when I look at the women basketball, I see many women basketball coaches who making a good job. Like for example, Becky Hammond is one of the Down Stanley or even in women soccer. But I don't see the same thing in women volleyball. And why you think is that happening?
Oh wow. That's a really good question. I do think that, basketball, it does have really strong origins in North America as well. I think that's a big piece. And, soccer is European, North America. I honestly don't know why there's a difference in those sports compared to volleyball. I do think that we will hopefully follow in their path, but historically it's been predominantly male coaches, and we've just taken some time to move on from that. I think there are some challenges in general for women in coaching, but they apply to all sports. I honestly don't know. That's a really tough question.
And when we're talking about your coaching philosophy, what are your approach to the work with coaching staff? Because I know the coaches that prefer the scheme that I'm the head coach, you are the assistant, you doing what I want you to do, and that's it. And sometimes I think the coaches for example, Alessandro Capini is something like this type of coach that likes delegating the piece of his job to the assistants and taking them so much flexibility. And what about you? What are your idea to managing your staff?
That's great to hear about Ale. I think he's a great coach. I'm very similar. I believe in total collaboration. I think it's my job to make the final decisions if we're unclear and to push us in the direction that we want to go. But my assistant coaches have a lot of autonomy. I work with the way I structure my staff. My first assistant, Vincenzo Malia, he's in charge of our offense. My second assistant, Matt Kruger, he's in charge of block defense. Those are the areas in which they coach and practice. Those are their areas of expertise, meaning they have to know everything about that side of our game, how we're playing, how we're performing, our opponents in those phases as well. They will take the lead on the game plans in those areas, present them to me, we'll talk through them. They'll present them to the athletes. When we call a timeout, and you'll see me in a timeout before I speak to the athletes, I go and meet with the assistant coaches. Depending on the phase of the game we're in, they'll give me information in their phase, and then I'll go to the athletes. Sometimes I'll even have them take the timeout. So I see it as very collaborative. I actually think that's one of our strengths as a staff is, yes, I'm the head coach, but we're a team. And I think we all bring our own levels of expertise in each area, and our ability to work together as a team is what makes us special. I'm very lucky. I have great guys that I work with. But I'm like Ale, I give a lot of flexibility. And I do think you have to, I worked with my staff for like 4 years. So the level of trust that we have and how we communicate with each other, I think has just been conducive to that style and that approach. When I first started coaching, early on with Australia, and Lauren was my assistant, so she'll tell you how crap I was at this. But I would just dictate, no, I'm going to make all the decisions. I'm going to do everything. You'll just like hit balls and run practice and help run drills. And my assistant coach hated it because she's like, well, how can I add value? And, I wasn't maximizing all the expertise and knowledge that she had because I was doing everything. I'm in charge. But it was because it came from a place of not being experienced, being insecure, because I had to have all the answers. And I learned over my coaching to let go. And yes, sometimes it's going to be perceived that maybe one of my assistants knows something more than me. And I don't really care how it's perceived anymore. I know that approach has worked for me. It has made me a better coach, and it made our team stronger. So how people perceive the level of knowledge and net level of independence I give my assistant coaches, I don't really care.
And what were your key things you look in assistant coaches when you were recruiting them? Because also this is a very interesting thing that some coaches likes to work with assistants that don't share the same views about volleyball.
Interesting. Early on in my coaching career, I wanted my assistant coaches to be more experienced than me. That was important because I was young. I didn't know what I didn't know. I wasn't that experienced at the international level. So I really wanted to make sure I had people around me who were very experienced. Going into Canada, I wanted someone who was number one, my first assistant, Vincenzo. I wanted them to be very strong in analytics. So really great at analyzing the numbers, that was very, very important to me. And Vincenzo's excellent at that. And then I wanted someone who was going to challenge how I design drills and how I prepared a team. And Matt Kruger actually has a master's in motor learning. So I knew that he could come in and challenge me, like, why are you doing that? Or have you thought about doing this? Or can you structure this differently? And that was important to me. So less about views on volleyball, more about me, I think, having an awareness of where I had a bit of a gap or where I wanted someone to challenge me and make me better. And that's how I ended up working with Vinny and Matt. And I think for me, it was also important to have people who were going to prioritize relationships that, wanted to connect closely with each other, but also connect closely with the athletes. And that was really important to me. So that's what I prioritized. And now, my next coaching job, maybe it will be different, but 4 years ago, I really wanted someone strong in analytics and someone who could challenge how I prepared a team from a practice perspective.
And how important for you as a coach is to be a good psychologist? Because I spoke with Lorotili and years ago, and we were talking about his gold medal with the French national team in Tokyo. And he said that after so many years of working with this team, and especially with Erwin and Gapet, who had opinion of like very hard to work person, he said that, but he worked with him very well. He said that after these years, I think I graduated from the psychology studies.
I think it's a huge part of what we do. I mean, I also think at the highest levels, we're looking for that 1%. And I think, automatically assume that 1% is going to be technical and tactical, but realistically, it could be your mental performance. It could be your nutrition. It could be your physical. And I think, that the psychology of the game is a huge part of coaching. I think more so now than ever before. I am lucky that I work with a great mental performance coach. Our team has a mental performance coach who traveled with them all quad to work on that culture piece, knowing ourselves, knowing how we show up in different situations, how we work with each other. I think that's also an area of greatest growth for our team and our program. People love to talk about our game that we lost against Netherlands to get into the Olympics. And there's lots of factors there, but I think that's also the very first time that most of our players and our staff have ever been in such a high stakes game, and we didn't perform to our best. We had 24 unforced errors. I think that's a big piece of it. So next time we're in a situation like that, we'll be more experienced and we'll also be better prepared. And I think that's the role of that performance psychology. I think as coaches, we naturally have to take on some of that, but I have been lucky in the last few years to hire a practitioner who specializes in mental performance.
And what about, also this is interesting thing for me, when coaches had to decide of picking a team for an important competition like World Championship or qualifiers, when you have to choose the 14th player. And I heard some stories from the coaches that, okay, when you have to pick the first setter or first opposite, first libero, you're always picking like the best. But sometimes when you have to pick the backup, the second setter, second opposite, it's not always the second best opposite in the country, because Hugh McCutcheon told me that, showed me a story from the 2008 Olympics when he had to pick the second setter to Volleyball, I think, and he had to choose between the Kevin Hansen and Donald Sujo, and he told me Donald Sujo was at that time slightly better, but the team was playing better and had better chemistry with Hansen. And I was thinking about your experience. How often you choose the player that maybe wasn't as good as the other player, but had the better chemistry with the team?
Yeah, I think that that's always a factor. I don't think that, as we've been building our program, I don't think we have the level of depth across our program as the other countries, so maybe not as relevant. However, absolutely, when you're looking outside your top 8 or top 9 players, you're looking for people who exemplify culture, who, being a second setter, I say that's the position you change the least. So being a second setter, are they a team player? Are they making the team better in practice? Are they supporting the top setter? Or are they getting pissed off they're on the bench? Those factors absolutely matter. And I think that that's the biggest difference. I know in Canada, a lot of the people who work in sport, like who make decisions around funding or the direction of sports, are all like individual sports. And that's really easy because it's pure performance, right? It's I'm not saying it's easy, but it's different. Like there's this whole other aspect and in team dynamics that we need to consider as coaches. And we talk about, okay, how do we perform at the high level? We have these pillars of performance. You have your technical and tactical, your mental, your emotional, your physical, but then you also have this pillar that's the team and how the team operates together and how the team connects. And when you're in pressure situations or in competition, I think that the team shows up in a certain way and you have to choose people who are going to fit that. Every single player are valued members of the program. However, when you're on court, you have people who are going to perform at the highest level, who's going to help the team win. And if you're not on court directly contributing to that, you have to contribute in other ways. And choosing people who help you do that is absolutely important. I do think it's not very often, though. I feel like we do have a lot of athletes who tick that box. It's not very often that, it's 1 or 2 players that you might just make that decision because they're maybe so close in the technical or tactical or so close in performance. What's the deciding factor? The deciding factor will be the culture piece. It will be the team chemistry piece because they're so close. I think when the gap's far, it's a little bit different in that sense, as long as there's that minimum standard of meeting expectations. But I absolutely agree with that.
I'm looking at the Canadian roster in recent years, and there are 2 players that we can say, if I know that you have to respect all the team, but there are 2 players that the main stars, I mean, Kiera Van Rijk and Alexa Gray, they played at the top teams in the world. And from coach perspective, how to combine using them as much as you want to, because they are great players at the top level, and using them as much in order to win a game, with also, having a balance, because, okay, sometimes Kiera or Alexa can have a bad day. And what we do when they are not efficient, we have to pick somebody else. So from your perspective, how big challenge was to compare to using of your best players with giving a chance to the other players?
There was a huge challenge. And I think that sometimes we didn't get it right. I think early on, my very first VNL, actually, Alexa was injured. Alexa had a pulled ab throughout all of VNL. So very first VNL I coached in 2021, we had super young outsides, Hillary Johnson then Hillary Howe and Andrea Mitrovic. And they started and played. And that was back when VNL was 15 games. It was back to back to back. And they played a ton of games and they got this incredible experience early on in their international careers. So that decision was sort of taken away from me early on in the quad. But as the quad grew, Alexa Gray and Kiera Van Rijk were huge pieces of our success. And our ability to win games really relied on how they performed. And so that balance of when can we get people opportunity, how do we continue to develop them is a massive challenge. Also, how do you manage these two athletes who take on a strong, like a high level of load? So I do think our ability to work with sports sciences in managing these athletes is our bread and butter. Like we have to do a really good job of that, or they will struggle to make it through the international season. I do think we do a good job of that. But what we actually do with our younger talent is we have continental events, much like you guys do in Europe. We have our Pan Am Cup, and we have NORCECA events. So we run a B team throughout the summer full time, and they compete in those events. And for instance, like a Pan Am Cup where it's not worth world ranking points, we'll take the players from the senior A team who haven't been getting a lot of court time, and they'll go to those events. So they'll be starters in that team. So while you may not see us change our lineup a ton at Volleyball Nations League or in, the FIVB events, we make sure that there's significant opportunity in the continental events where they get the pressure of being a go-to hitter, the starting player. And, there are still some strong competition, NORCECA. Still teams in the top 25 in the world. So we try and get them opportunities that way. And then, because we do have still a young roster in some positions, you saw at Volleyball Nations League this last year, our P2, that was a revolving door. We switched between think that's also how they're getting experience, and then ensuring that they're going to high level pro clubs, playing in Poland for Dre's now in China. Hillary was in Poland last year and now she's in Turkey. So they get that high level of international experience, through their pro clubs as well. But it's a challenge, and it's something that you're always wrestling with as a coach. Performance versus development, getting the experience for the next athletes coming through while also winning games. And with the last quad and how they did world ranking points, you didn't have the luxury of games that meant nothing. Whereas prior to last quad, we had a lot of games that meant nothing. It was easy. Like, we'll send a B team out there and play this game because it doesn't matter if we lose. We did not have that luxury last year. And qualifying for Olympics came down to our last game. Would it have come down to our last game had we made more changes throughout VNL and allowed for losses? Probably not. And so people don't necessarily understand how important not just winning games, but winning games in 3 sets. Or if you're losing in 5, how important that was and how much that impacted whether or not we were in the position to qualify for Paris. So it's a challenge. Sometimes we got it right, sometimes we didn't.
You mentioned like the names like Hilary Johnson or Andrea Mitrowicz. They played also in the past in Poland, also as Kiera, as Natasha Kalkins.
Yep.
And I was wondering, what are your thoughts about the Polish volleyball?
I love the Polish league. I actually like Polish volleyball. I like I'm a fan of the Polish national team, and I am a fan of Stefano Lavarini as well. But I do love the Polish league. I think it's a high level. I think it's a great league, and I don't think it gets the acknowledgement it deserves. I would love to see more Canadians in the Polish league. I think it's a really strong level of competition for sure, and I just don't think it gets the recognition it deserves. I also love playing volleyball in Poland. Favorite memories, oddly enough, was World Championships in 2022. We had to, if we'd beat Poland, we would have made it into the quarterfinals. And although we finished 10th at World Championships, it was a historic finish for Canada. We'd never made it to second round before. And we went up in a very close game against Poland, but we ended up losing a very tough game, very questionable referee call. But there was 10,000 fans in that stadium. The environment was incredible. Polish fans were incredible. And we were playing Poland. And I think it's on my screensaver. I think it's on my coach's screensaver. It was it was a very, very surreal moment playing in Poland against Poland. And so I'm a big fan of all the volleyball there.
I look at the Polish team rise from the beginning of the Stefano Lavarini work, and I'm trying to see to combine this with your rise, like the rise of the Canadian national team. Although you started 1 year earlier before Stefano, because he came in 2022. but I remember like the beginnings. For example, if you remember the VNL 2022, I think the first game was Poland against Canada. And to be honest, sorry to say, but this was awful game to watch. And from that time, I know how difficult job at the beginning had Coach Lavarini, but I also see how big progress this team made, and seeing, for example, the quarterfinals of the Olympics and the 2 bronze medal VNLs. So you said that you like the job of Lavarini. What are the best things about his job that you like?
Well, it's funny. I started coaching against Stefano when he was with Korea. So that year that we surprisingly challenged Poland because in VNL 2021 he was coaching Korea, and for the first couple of times of VNL, the first few years of VNL, we would always play Poland in the first round. It was always to 5, and we'd narrowly lose. Yes. And we competed. So I'd like to think our rise sort of happened at the same time. They obviously took off a little bit more than us. I love how competitive Poland is. I think you have so much talent in your national team. I think Stefano does such a great job of making all that talent work together and ensuring that you play such a you're all on the same page when you're playing against us, and the compete, like you're the team that never goes away. Like you've never beat Poland until the end of the game. Like it's like I think about that World Championships, like the crowd got quiet there for a little bit because it was looking like Canada was going to take this game, and they once they took that 4th set, they annihilated us in the 5th. But I love the way he does that. And, his staff, they're so hardworking. We always end up in similar rounds to us and always working hard in the lobby. You're always seeing they're always working, and just the connection they have between staff and athletes. I think it's admirable what Stefano has built, but I also think it speaks a lot to the level of talent you have in Poland. I consider Poland to be a volleyball nation. Just so passionate about their sport. From a very young age, as fans, as athletes, as coaches. And I think there's just this real culture of loving the game and being passionate about the game. And then a real culture of, but we're going to work so incredibly hard. We're going to outwork every single country. And you get a sense of that when you play against Poland. And
you have a favorite player in the Polish team?
From Poland?
That you would like to have in your team.
I'd like, I love Volos. I think is one of the best setters in the world. I think she's incredible. Yeah. I also really like Stysiak. I think she's a young player who has still so much more potential, and she's still playing at a really high level. And I think you have great players, but those are probably 2 of my favorite.
And I have to ask about one player from Canada, Anna Smrek, who just who signed a few weeks ago with Milano. Like she's 209 centimeters, so like amazing physicality, amazing talent. She played years in Wisconsin. What are your thoughts about her and how you see her future?
I was actually in Wisconsin in October visiting Anna. I think Anna has such a bright future ahead of her. I expect to see her play for Canada this year. We've been very patient because she's been, building her career at Wisconsin. We've been in regular contact with her, and just staying across, her development with herself and her coach. She's a very interesting player. She's very professional, very driven. I think she wants big things and she puts in the work to achieve those. So I think she has a really exciting career ahead of her. It'll be interesting to see how she fits within the team, but I fully expect her to be playing for Canada this summer. And yes, I mean, her size, she moves so well for her size. I think she will, help us on the front line, especially as a block and offense that people are probably going to think twice about setting into. I'm very keen to see how the rest of her season goes with Milano as well. I know with Wisconsin, she played both opposite and middle. And I know Milano, she's playing in the opposite position. So it'll be interesting to see what Gio's plans are for her with our team, but we expect to see her play for Canada.
I'm also wondering how Giovanni Guidetti will compare to put the Anna and Kiera van Rijk, because also Kiera is the opposite. So how to mix?
I mean, That's definitely, that I think the one thing that Gio has great experience with is managing a roster rich in talent. And so I think he has the experience to do that. I know Anna's looking forward to playing for Canada. We're looking forward to having her in the gym. What role she plays, I think that's to be decided. But I really like what I see from Anna. And I just, as a person, when you talk to her and you sit down with her, she is very driven. She's willing to put in the work to become one of the, become a world-class player. I think she's very aware of what's required, and her family's based in Europe. So I think that's where she wants to be right now. And that's perfect.
And coming to the end, because almost all podcasts is about you and volleyball. And I was wondering, how is Shannon outside the volleyball? How you do you have even a hobby, besides the volleyball? How you live without volleyball?
Wow.
Because you said that even you spoke with kids about Olympics. So I was wondering, do you have a chance to be like the Shannon Winzer, not a coach, not a director, not a volleyball freak, but just a person, normal person?
It's sad that I am like, I don't know if I do have much of a life outside of this. I do love sport, and I love my kids' sport. So while I'm not the coach of Canada or the director now of Canada, Canadian volleyball, I am actually known to my kids as their lacrosse coach. I actually I coach my kids in lacrosse, and I love watching them play. It's a Canadian sport.
Because your dad played lacrosse.
My dad played in the Western Lacrosse League. He played at a really high level, and I love the sport. My boys both play it, and so I coach them. We are actually, we're headed towards provincial championships. But other than watching my kids play sport, and my life is very much Canadian volleyball. But outside of that, I'd say my hobby is sport with my kids. And that's probably about it.
Yeah, and at the end, because also always I ask my guests to pick a dream team of the players, but only from the dream team of the players that worked with. You can choose based on sympathy. You can choose based on the skills.
Internet cut out. My internet just cut out there. What was that, Miguel?
I would like you, because it's like the ritual in my podcast that the guests had to pick their dream team, but only the players they work with, and based on your sympathy towards them, based on their skill level, with explanation of each choice. But you have to choose like the dream team and the coach of this team. And I will start with the setter.
I would choose Volos as the setter.
Why?
Oh, I keep cutting out. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I would go Volos as a setter, Isabel Haak as opposite.
But you have to explain me why you will pick Volos and Haak.
This is okay. I would pick Volos because of how she runs her offense, how deceptive she is. I would go with Isabel Haak just for her range and attack, and I think her energy on court I really like as well. For middle blockers,
yes, two middle blockers. I would keep Emily Maglio. Can I keep Emily Maglio? Yeah,
I think she's one of the most underrated middle blockers. I think her ability to block, and she was the best blocker at VNL as well. I would also go with Zara Gunyas from Turkey. I think her ability in attack is really strong. I think she's pretty hard to stop in system ball. Libero, I will go with Dominican Libero. I think she's one of the best liberos in the world. I think she literally wins games in defense for Dominicans. So I'm going to go with her. And left sides is really, really hard.
Yeah, two outside hitters.
I think left sides are hard, or outside hitters are hard. Who would be my top pick? I'm going to be biased and keep Alexa Gray. I think that her range in attack and just her back row pipe, particularly in transition, is excellent. And another left side. I'm gonna go old school. I'm going with Jordan Larson. just her ability to manage the backcourt and provide that consistency and pass, I think would do a great job of setting up the rest of our hitters.
And
that's a really tough question.
And what about coach Shannon Winzer or somebody else?
Well, if I can't coach it, then I guess I'll hire Gio to coach it for me.
Okay, because sometimes coaches like to pick themselves as a coach of the dream team.
I've never thought about that. No, I think, I kind of picked it as if I was coaching, but if I'm not coaching, then I would pick obvious reasons. I think Gio has this incredible ability to understand different players and understand how to connect with them and then how to bring them all together. I think that's, we talk about coaches being the manager of people. I think people.
And a part of staying healthy, what I can wish to you?
Canada to qualify for LA 2028.
Okay, so I wish you this, and I wish you all the best to your team, to your family. And I have to say, it was a great pleasure to host you in my podcast. A big thanks, coach, for having time for me, because it was very interesting to listen your thoughts, and I'm glad that you were so open to me.
I appreciate it. It was a great interview. I thought you asked some really great questions. I appreciate that.